It's always fun watching people enter. There's like 10 people, now 20. And it goes by fast.
Yeah, I can
Sweet.
see Aaron Tony.
All right. So it's only 12:30 p.m. for me Central Time, so I'm feeling good. How are you guys feeling, Karthik and Uma?
Yeah, good.
Well, it's a little late into the night. It's day two as well, so slightly different than yesterday, but a lot of energetic sessions, a lot of new information to me as well. So keeping myself busy listening to the talks. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, and just for everybody joining, if you're expecting Anna Medina originally to keynote, she was unavailable to attend, but she promised she'll attend our next event that we have. And maybe we'll have a mini Chaos Carnival in the fall too, so we'll see. But what's better here is we have Uma and Karthik, right? They co-founded Chaos Native together. They built Litmus Chaos, and now they're building Harness Chaos Engineering. And what we felt was we could have an AMA session and ask me anything. So in the Q&A tab, if you can start putting questions in, if you want to stump them on anything, you can ask easy questions. But we have a wide variety in the audience, from students, to people that are just trying to build their resume with chaos engineering, to people that have already automated it, and have been using products. So if we can get some questions put in, that'll be great. We have some starter questions too. Andrew said he's going to throw so many curveballs. Okay. That works. Well, yeah, we have a question here for Uma. Where are we with adoption of chaos engineering as an industry, and what are your observations?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We definitely are seeing more and more interest in the last 3-4 years. Chaos engineering, we all know that it all started as a kind of a research project 10, 12 years ago. But last 5 years is really the momentum that picked up. We have more vendors, more cloud services, right? More enterprise editions, more open source project. So definitely it has evolved into a kind of a segment in itself, right? Either it could be adjacent segment to a traditional one, or to the cloud native itself. But we can see that is a proof, right? So there is a reason for that, right? It's not just that vendors are pushing, open source enthusiasts are pushing. When I first introduced Litmus to the open source community out of just enthusiasm, we were totally surprised, how much of great reception it received, primarily because there was a real need, right? So looks like there is industry set up for a kind of a natural need for chaos engineering, primarily driven by Kubernetes and cloud, services. So we've been talking about crossing the chasm, right? So it's a very tough one to say whether we really crossed or crossing. So overall, as an industry, I would say it crossed, but there is a chasm to cross within an organization again and again, right? So if you look at what's happening in the industry, same thing you can see within an organization, right? So there's no question on why it's needed in any organization, but mostly it's are people able to really convince the budgetary requirements, how many people can spend time on it. We are seeing patterns on, you don't need to really put additional budget except for some tooling, but it should really get your developers to write chaos tests, right? So it's make it part of the DevOps, right? So I definitely see there is an acceptance of chaos engineering in the industry, and it's only a question of how deep each organizations are going to go. And I talked about chaos maturity model. In any organization, after they think they should start and use chaos engineering for increasing the resilience, it takes years, right? It's not just 1 quarter, 2 quarters. So I would say we'll be in this adoption mode for the next 1 or 2 years. There's going to be a lot of innovations coming in. We have seen the open source innovations the last few years, and now, especially, I'm dealing with how can I take this technology that we built and actually see people using it for solving real enterprise, resilience issues. And looks like it's a slightly different game altogether, right? So security and policies coming in, each customer having different requirements, different systems. So even though the technology is good, you need good integrations. So you will see chaos engineering getting integrated to more of the tools that enterprises use, rather than just push the tool as is, right? So I think the industry will go through that change of chaos becoming a kind of a need, and getting more integrations to be done. So that's how I would put it. Maybe Karthik has slightly a different opinion on it.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that Uma said. I'll probably just answer to another aspect of the adoption of chaos engineering. Which is the persona that is actually adopting it? I think it was seen as a very esoteric art. Chaos engineering was restricted to SREs and probably uh, people who would identify themselves as the operations folks. But I think chaos has become more democratized, so to say, over time. A lot of the users of the chaos tooling, people whom we talk to in the community on a regular basis, happen to be performance test engineers, they're QA folks, many times application developers who want quick feedback on the resilience of what they're building. So it's becoming more and more adopted. I think the chaos first principle, as they call it, I think that's the term that was sort of popularized by Adrian and other advocates of chaos. I think that sort of seeped in into the community very significantly. So there are people who are doing chaos across different environments, across roles, and I think that's really a good sign. I think it will take. It is going to accelerate adoption of chaos and just popularize the principles that much more. So yeah, I think that's one trend that we're definitely looking at.
All right. We scored that question and answer as like 98%. Well done. So great job. We'll go. We're voting. So we got some votes on a thing. So please upvote if you're not asking a question. You can just like emphasize which one you want. If you want to raise your hand, we'll invite you to stage too. And I'll take priority for people that raise their hand outside of the question, so we can make it kind of fun. All right. So here's the next question. So what easily accessible metrics would you recommend that engineers use to justify the resources they need for their chaos program? I want to hear Karthik answer this one, if that's okay. I'll have him jump in.
Yeah, I think it's a very hard thing. Sylvain had a great presentation yesterday called "The Struggle for Chaos Engineering." He talked about all the obstacles one would face in an organization trying to push chaos engineering. Both the decision makers as well as as well as those implementing the decisions have different kind of challenges. They have their own struggles. The question here is about what kind of a metric can engineers use to justify the resources that they need for their case program. I was just reading the question to sort of let it sink in. So let me relate a story, or it's not really a story, it's something that we saw recently. We were trying to help one of our customers adopt our chaos engineering tool, and they try to do this, in a program called as Fail Friday. So they have this interesting program where they just go ahead and inject failures on this is random failures on the system. Of course, when I say random, they're all very well thought of. But they inject failures in the system without the development and the SRE team actually knowing about it. So they are expected to react. They are expected to find out their incident readiness, etc. And one of the numbers that the incident commanders was throwing out during the course of that program or that event was how much of money or how much of revenue is potentially going to be burnt in this service not performing in an optimal way. So he was just calling out those numbers. He was saying, okay, this service has been down for this much time. We are still trying to debug and trying to bring it up, and it's causing us this much of loss, right? I think that's a very powerful, probably the most powerful metric to convince the management. So if you could tie your lack of resilience to business outcomes and basically the dollars burned, I think that's probably the most convincing way to do it. But there are, of course, other soft approaches. Many times we've seen chaos engineering being pushed through by implementing it on entities that are not really impacting your uptime, so to say, but they're all orthogonal functions. For example, monitoring, you take down, you do chaos on monitoring, you find out how many notifications were missed or how many alerts were missed because your monitoring system was not performing in a resilient way, and how much of an issue that is going to cause to your incident response teams. Right, some of those metrics are also useful. I think there are both hard and soft ways to actually get the message through.
Okay. Good answer, Uma. Is there anything you'd like to add before we move to the next question?
Yeah, maybe I can add. Hopefully, there's no downvote right for the answers. So Andrew is ready. Andrew always asks the right great questions with his experience and all. So it's a bit of a dilemma, right? So we are trying to convince people that it has got value, and first thing that managers ask, okay, I believe in you, but give me the data or why, how do I even see what it is, right? So I would actually split this answer into two simple things. It depends on where you're trying to measure, developers versus SRE. That's where a lot of confusion has been happening. Chaos engineering always is for SREs kind of a thing. So in the prerequisites, APM systems are needed, right? A whole investment into observability is needed for chaos engineering. Not necessarily, right? So we are now talking about adoption of chaos engineering in DevOps itself. As I told, our observation as Litmus maintainers, community members, we're seeing a lot of usage in non-prod QA pipelines, all that stuff, right? So you don't really have the regular metrics like MTTA, MTTR there. So what you really are going to have is, we are trying to build some metrics for those chaos coverage and all, slightly futuristic. It's not an industry term, but if you ask me, what should you see as a possible metric there to measure is really how much of your incidents are drawing the attention of your developers, right? So do you have any reliability issues that are causing developer productivity yeah, being affected, right? So if your developer are spending more time on issues relating to even it could be a lot of design discussions are happening because these things keep coming up, or people are on calls trying to debug or trying to write recovery procedures. So these are indications that your developer productivity is less, right? So you could then go proactively put some effort. Okay, we are anyway spending time. Why don't we put some structural process into that and then see if we can find weaknesses in a more structured manner, right? But long term, I would really um, recommend we have something like resilience coverage or chaos coverage, right? Just like code coverage. That's my wish. That's what we are pushing, but that's us, right?
Yeah. No, it's really great to bring up developer productivity, like you said. I mean, at the end of the day, like I used to work on a chaos engineering team, and we were trying to, prevent outages, right, and save, economical, financial, and like lower risk. But I was honestly trying to make developers just have more time to be productive, right? Be more creative writing code, have more time for innovation and all that. So those are great metrics to think about. So let's go to this next question. We got 4 votes. I'm going to invite this person up to stage. Nobody's been brave enough yet, but we'll see. You're invited. So pre-prod environments are not the most stable. And how do you prevent or avoid a chaos experiment being interrupted? So it looks like Angel.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Chaos Carnival.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Great question you asked. I assume you have some real experience with this, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's cool. So Uma, how have you usually worked with people, when they're in, like a non-prod environment and it is kind of unstable?
As I said, we are now looking at, his title is shown as SRE, right? So I would try to put my answer focused on SRE persona here, right? Um, so I think the first way to look at chaos experiments is to not go break things and then try to prove that there is a problem, right? So try to build even in your pre-prod environment. Try to build a situation where you're guaranteeing that you're testing for resilience for some common use cases, right? So build some chaos experiments that are easy to run. Bring down few things, and then try to build the steady state conditions that you can observe, right? And that will throw up some of the requirements of fixing something in your pre-prod environment, right? Obviously, if you're going after a specific scenario to be reproduced, you need to set up your environment. But I would actually try to put some common experiments into pre-prod and see if they can be pushed even into where did this code come from to the pre-prod environment, and maybe your staging environment or QA environment is stable enough to run this few experiments and then try to automate them. But this is a common challenge as well, right? So I'm not totally surprised that everyone else is also facing this issue. We do too, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, we do a lot of planning, and we invite people, and we send communications, and we do all those things. And by the time that we actually all, after all that effort, whenever we are, in a meet, actually pulling up our tooling and started to do the injections we want to do, we noticed that there is a sudden issue on our pre-prod environment, and we cannot do anything because it's going to skew the information that we're collecting, right? So pretty much it would be worthless to do any type of effort of injection or chaos experiment, because the results are not going to be trustworthy. So I was thinking a bit on that side. If you have any advice of how can we prevent those somehow, or if you have any suggestions on how to tackle that. But that comment was
Yeah.
good. So
Yeah, I mean, like chaos engineering. Some of the benefits of chaos engineering are not always related to resiliency improvements, right? As seen by end user services. So this could be a good example of how chaos engineering can tell you that there are things to be improved in your automation, right? Just because it's pre-prod environment, it doesn't mean that it just can be broken. Effectively, you are spoiling someone's real time, right? I mean, trying to make it stable and all. So it's again productivity of the team members, employees in question there. So by trying to automate whatever recovery or configurations that are required to keep environment stable, you are actually going to improve the situation where you can run some real chaos experiments. So by the need of this chaos experiments to be run on pre-prod, you are actually automating the pre-prod environment. So that could be an indirect benefit. But there's no easy way, Angel, for that.
yeah. Thank you. That was useful. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I just have one opinion to add there. Like, I definitely agree with Angel and Uma. Uh, you don't want spurious results from your chaos experimentation, and the overall DevOps efficiency is improved. By ensuring that you have a stable system to run chaos experiments. You're always trying to ensure that, so your indirect benefit is your DevOps processes improve and you get better systems. But there's also another aspect to it. I think there's also some responsibility or some onus on the tooling side to ensure that it is able to call out certain issues within the system that it is operating upon, and then probably not go ahead and give you those spurious results, right? So sometimes you might need the right guardrails. You need to be able to define the right guardrails into your experiment to say, I'm going to inject chaos only when so and so condition is met, or I'm going to abort the chaos based on so and so conditions, right? So that's something, if you have that, it's definitely going to be useful. A much better use of time if you have some guidance coming from the tooling in terms of what results are worth interpreting and what results are better to be discarded. Yeah.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
that's great. One, I'm the moderator, so I'm not supposed to answer, but I like this question so much too. And a friend that I have at a retail environment, they were trying to justify having like provision servers in staging that were like the same size as production, but the cost, is a lot more in staging. So they ended up putting in, some auto stopping rules so they could like turn their staging environment on off. So from an efficiency perspective, but then they leveraged some chaos experiments, right? So they could tune their system so it would behave more in a stable way. So then they had like bigger workloads, if you will, because they were doing some really great load injection too to consume all that. And then they were able to justify the costs too, because they were able to shut it off and on quickly and reliably. And they use chaos experiments just to, again, tune that system. So the efficiency play there is really great when you think about chaos engineering too, because it'll save you money and time. All right. Well, Angel, thank you so much. I'm going to see if I can kick you off the stage. I don't know, but I'm gonna go to the next question here. I'll show this on stage. All right. So Karthik, question for you. A lot of the buzz around chaos engineering seems to be around cloud native infrastructure. Do the modern approaches and tools work for legacy heritage infrastructure?
Great question. Yes, I think there's a lot of buzz. Cloud native chaos engineering is a subcategory. There's a lot of literature around it if you find on the net. But this is not to say, I think all the recent trends around a cloud native way of approaching chaos tooling itself becoming microservices oriented, most of the targets being around Kubernetes and similar cloud native sort of targets. That's what is in discussion, but that does not discount or does not mean chaos engineering cannot be applied to legacy infrastructure. It is very much applicable there. And most of the tooling that is available today, the so-called cloud native chaos tooling, is also capable of doing chaos on the legacy entities. It could be your on-prem bare metal systems. It could be maybe EC2 instances, if you can call that legacy. But there's also another challenge. The diversity of targets are just increasing. There's also managed services. Today's cloud native environments are very, very hybrid in nature. There's some part of it that you host, some part of it which is all managed. You're using a lot of third-party services. So it's necessary to do chaos, look at chaos from a holistic perspective. Most of the tooling today is supportive of that. I can talk to the example of harness chaos engineering. The enterprise hub that you see there has well over 100 chaos experiments, and a lot of that is outside of Kubernetes as well, right? So you could definitely use it. So that said, there's one challenge that probably needs to be considered and resolved. You would need a homogeneous way of defining your fault and hypothesis validation intent. It becomes very difficult to manage your chaos ecosystem within your organization if you're using different ways of injecting chaos on different entities. You do one way for Kubernetes, you do it one way for EC2 instances, you do it a different way for on-premise systems. It can get very difficult to manage. It's not very scalable. So you would need a homogeneous way of defining your fault. What is it that you're going to inject, and what is it that you want to validate it? Of course, the business logic can change, but as far as the user of chaos is concerned, it needs to be very simple for them to define. And that's something that we've taken care to ensuring as part of the Harness Chaos platform. But I'm sure that that's the objective that many other tools in the space also have. So to answer the question, of course, the buzz is because of all the digital transformation and migration that people are doing to Kubernetes and cloud native. But chaos engineering as a principle is equally applicable to legacy infrastructure. And the tooling that we have today is capable of achieving that as well.
Yeah, I would just summarize one more point to that. For example, you can split this into control plane and execution plane, right? So you would want to give your developers same experience with respect to managing the chaos experiments, whether they are targeted towards cloud native or legacy, right? So the format of the experiments, how you maintain them, will be same, right, through the regular YAML files. But you could try to suit them for environments at the back end, depending on what they are. For example, Harness Chaos, we are introducing experiments for Linux. But the format in which the Linux experiments are coming in, they look like same, right? It doesn't matter whether it's for Kubernetes or not. So the whole idea is try to give the same developer experience, right? So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, and Vivek had an additional question on top of that, and he got invited to stage. I accidentally unmuted you, but it looks like you got back in. So thank you. Did you want to ask your question? Because it does relate to the last question. Vivek, can you hear us? All right, I'll ask the question too that he said, but so how can you run chaos experiments on legacy systems like mainframes when you can't really install those kind of agents? Yeah, Karthik, Uma, do you want to talk through that? Or?
Yeah, this is a curveball question. We've been facing this issue. How do you do chaos engineering on mainframes or other totally legacy services, or to some extent the cloud services that I'm using where I don't have any control on, um, or even the bare metal services which do not have the IPMI interfaces, because we are very much relying on them for our business. An incident on that is very expensive, right? Outage on that. There's no easy answer to that. This is where we would rely on two things. One is the general management of chaos tooling, right? And the other one is, your own expertise with respect to this mainframes or your legacy infrastructure. We, as a tool vendor or a open source project maintainer, we would not know about a generalized way to deal with mainframes, just like we know Kubernetes or Linux, right? But I'm pretty sure you've been managing the recovery processes, right? And then there would be a lot of tooling that's already there to reproduce, or your QA members would have tested it, right? You might be calling them as some kind of a failure testing. So you take those scripts and then try to put them into an executable bunch of scripts, or you can even containerize such things, right? So you containerize them, put those scripts, and target them towards your mainframe execution environment through SSH or any other means. So we actually call this as BYOC, bring your own chaos, right? So we will try to provide a framework and not an entire solution. You can use that framework and then write your own chaos experiments and try to use the other parts of your chaos tooling, such as metrics, overall resilience score, how does this compare to the the other infrastructures that you have, etc., etc. That's probably one way of looking at it, in my opinion.
Yeah, great. And I think Vivek was switching his headset. If he's back, if you have any follow-up question to that or real experience from your working environment, we'd love to hear it. Looks like he's. Can you hear us? No. Okay. That's okay, Vivek. We will connect later for sure. One thing I was going to add too from my days at working at Target Corporation, we did annual mainframe disaster recovery tests that were a whole lot of fun. Had many late nights with IBM people that I'm still friends with, but we ended up doing chaos experiments on the dependencies of the mainframe, right? Like there's a lot of SaaS and third-party stuff that gave it data because, to be honest, the mainframe still exists out there. It's a huge footprint for a lot of companies, especially like a BMO, like where Vivek's from, right? But then what we ended up doing, since we didn't actually write any scripts or bring our own chaos to the mainframe, we just talked to the mainframe team just about the failure modes, right? We use a scientific method that's evolved into chaos engineering and just talk failure modes of the mainframe and then walked through manual experiments from that. So you can always start there too.
Looks like my mic is working now. Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay,
sounds
perfect.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to listen to Uma and you, Matthew. So yeah, the one thing that we were able to do, I guess, was like there was a limitation as to what kind of attacks we could perform. Like obviously we were not able to install the agent on the mainframes, but the traffic, like the I guess the outbound traffic that's going to the mainframes, or so that we could do like a packet loss or that kind of chaos attacks is what we were able to do. So there's a limitation as to what kind of attacks we were able to run when it comes to mainframes. So that is what we were able to do. But I was kind of wondering if there's anything else that I could do on top of that.
I think there are some very interesting things. I mean, just to add to what Vivek was saying, people are bringing some pretty interesting use cases into the ambit of chaos engineering. Uh, Things like bring port bounces on switch infrastructure switches, right? You implement telnet programs to go ahead and do port bounce operations, and you sort of wrap that inside of your chaos experiment, which of course has its own structure, which is what Uma was alluding to when he said you can use the B by OC approach. Often a chaos experiment is a series of steps. Fault injection happens to be just one of them. You might want to do pre-chaos checks, post-chaos checks. There's some validation that you want to do, some scoring that you want to do. So you could sort of bring what you already have into that framework, and then sort of use that along with the other standard kind of targets that you're doing chaos upon to get a holistic view, to get a consistent view of the resilience.
Awesome.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Thanks for coming on stage. Appreciate that. All right, let's go to the next question here. Just being honest with what's here. Let's see. Okay, clicking a button. All right. So what are your thoughts, experience on people, chaos engineering? And then, yeah, for example, freezing out a team tech lead or senior engineer.
Yeah.
So I'll let you go, Uma.
Yeah, no, this is, we call it as operations chaos, right? If you seen my patterns yesterday in my presentation, this is actually very important. A lot of people run game days on people also. There are a few angles to it. One is uh, that usually comes is your secrets management, right? Something gone down, you need to recover, and then you have dependency on certain people who know exactly what to do. But if that person is not available, your recovery time is directly affected, right? That's pretty common, right? So the fire drills, right? The other one is something like what Matt is suggesting here, Matt Antley, phrasing out a tech lead or a senior engineer that knows a certain thing. One of the benefits of chaos engineering is you're going to teach your own team how the dependencies or architecture works with the dependent components, right? So you're not everybody that's there in the team is aware of how exactly the product works in depth, because they were not there from beginning and they're not been there across the entire journey, right? So you need to educate the people to be responding the right way to the right incidents, and there's no better way to actually cause those incidents in pre-prod or in QA environments, right? So I definitely recommend doing people chaos engineering, right? So even as simple as some of the recovery procedures are not well documented. So your documentation, is it in place or not? And don't try to get your the expert to do the recovery in these positions. Rather, anybody who has common knowledge on the service of the product, let them do by following certain documentation. So you're double checking your documentation as well, right? So I totally agree with what Matt is suggesting. It's very very important, especially when it comes to prod, right? And this SREs.
Nice.
think
And I
you
invited
should
Matt to the stage, but I
actually.
don't go on mute. But yeah, Karthik, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying you should catch the recording of Yuri Nino's talk yesterday called Documenting Chaos. I think she had some great points around a similar topic.
Yeah, there's so many great presentations, and again, everything's recorded, so we'll be able to go from there as well. All right. There's a couple questions that are getting upvoted faster than it can click. So let's do this one. I can invite to stage as well. But what happens to an experiment if the system suddenly shuts down while it's running? How will it affect an environment? And yeah, maybe you can talk about like some safety mechanisms you can put in place, or just from experience, if you've had an environment go chaotic while you've been running it.
Go ahead,
I'll
Karthik.
probably go ahead and take this one. So I think it's a great question. I think two things are very important. One is we need to be transparent from a tooling perspective that an experiment could not actually complete because it was disrupted. It probably the system just crashed and the experiments couldn't complete, right? And the entities that were carrying out the experiment business logic, in most cases, there are pods that are carrying out that business logic. What happens to them, right? So it's important to bubble up the right status for the people who are executing the chaos experiment to understand that this is what has happened to it, number one, and not give out false results. Number two, it's important to ensure that there is no chaos residue left inside of the system. Maybe you've injected a process inside of a container to go block some network traffic. You don't want that persisting when your experiment was disrupted. So you need to have the right mechanisms to ensure that upon such events, you are cleaning up whatever was injected. So the ability to revert what was injected is very important. Right? That's something that is really important to do, and we've sort of addressed that as part of the Harness Chaos platform as well. To the second part of the question, will it affect the environment or results? Yes. So it's important, like I said, to ensure that this is not counted as part of your result. You should not be getting a resilience score that says, this is what happened to your experiment, but this is how resilient you were, as part of, because you're not in a position to determine that resilience at all in the first place. So you need to have the right ways to say that this is probably an invalid attempt of the experiment due to this shutdown event or this kind of a crash that happened on your infrastructure, as also ensure that there's no residue that's left inside of the system. have right reward procedures, right recovery procedures, and then also have enough ways to reschedule these chaos experiments once the system is back in good state. And I think, Matt, I think the point that you were making before I started answering this question is to have the right kind of guardrails. That's also important. So ensure that when you're rerunning these chaos experiments, you sort of understand what happened before, and then you're able to check for the right kind of status before you inject the faults. I think those kind of controls in the tooling are important, and being transparent about what ran and what did not is important.
It's a good test for the tool that you choose, right? Is your tool really supporting this kind of high availability, right? So, good
Yeah,
question.
and what I was going to highlight too, just as a former product manager, like if you look at the category of features here and capabilities that the Harness platform offers around steady state measurement, experiment control methods, chaos engineering, again, is all about the scientific method, right? So the tool selection should reflect those capabilities so that you can automate it. So, a human doesn't necessarily have to think through every single step of this process, right? And if you can automate it and put in the safety controls, then you can actually have it continuous. And just we don't expect any human to forget why we're doing this at all. Like humans should still understand why they're using resilience mechanisms and all that such. So I just going to share this because it led into what Karthik was talking about, just around, again, observability, steady state measurement, experiment control methods. And then I'm going to actually turn it over to Karthik to talk a little bit about the CNCF working group. Feel free to ask questions, but we'll be wrapping up here and continuing the conversation on the Slack community as well with additional questions.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for giving the opportunity to speak about the CNCF efforts around chaos. So, as you all know, Litmus Chaos is one of the incubating chaos projects in CNCF, and the CNCF landscape has other chaos tools in it as well. And there is an initiative called as the Chaos Engineering Work Group, in which we're trying to gather the chaos community. Of course, it's a vendor neutral sort of group. We are trying to gather the chaos community, people who are interested in chaos. They may be practitioners, people who want to be, who want to start doing chaos experiments, people who are in leadership positions, trying to take an overall view of resilience, vendors, end users, service providers, all kind of personas, right? We're trying to bring them under one umbrella and try and see what is the perspective they hold around chaos and what is it that they need from the community at large and from CNCF in order to succeed in their attempts of achieving resilience in their respective roles. So we are trying to put together some literature, some white papers, try and define a charter for the working group. What are we going to focus on? How are we going to try and educate people on how you can do chaos, how you should approach chaos, etc. So we've started this effort some time back. In fact, it's nearly about a year and a half back. I would encourage you to join the chaos working group, sign up as interested parties, try and attend the fortnightly meetings that we have on the chaos engineering work group. There's been a little bit of a lull in the work group over the last year or so, but we're trying to pick the pieces again and get it going. So I would request you to join the work group, participate, learn about chaos, share your own perspectives. We're all there to learn, and all the learnings are being captured there as user interviews and as user experiences, etc. So it's basically for helping the community adopt chaos engineering and move forward with it. Right. So we will be sharing some links on how you can participate in the chaos engineering work group. There's a repository where you can find some information. So we will, if you are interested in getting in touch, just create an issue on the repository saying you're interested to participate, and then we will reach out to you and add you in the invites for the meetings. So this is as part of this is an initiative by CNCF being driven by members in the Litmus Chaos and other chaos project communities. So yeah, I think that. Thanks, Matt.
Excellent. And thank you to Jesse for fixing my URL link. Appreciate that. So we put the links in the chat so you can join that CNCF working group, take the survey. Right after this, there's a great workshop from Nagaro offering talks about chaos engineering, resiliency, continuous resilience. I ask you to all join that. I'm heading over there. We'll have practical examples that you can take home with you to your company and coworkers. But thank you, Uma and Karthik, so much. Appreciate your expertise and appreciate everybody's great questions. We'll continue some of those questions and answers in the Slack community. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yes.